Russia's now in the Middle East. What does this mean to you as a student of the Bible? And here to discuss this very important topic with us today, author, lecturer, Bill Salus. His new book, The NOW Prophecies, is amazing, and you'll want to read it. But more about that later. Bill, great book, great topic, very, very current topic. What prompted you to write the NOW Prophecies? And just give us a kind of a rundown, an overview of the book.
Well, Gary, it's good to be back on your program again. Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome.
And thanks for the encouragement on the book. I'm real excited about the book, The NOW Prophecies. I'm real interested in what's going to happen, and I believe in our lifetime, Gary. We're seeing all these prophecies converge and come forward, but which ones could actually come forward are imminent, lacking any real conditions that set them apart from like future prophecies. And that's what the NOW prophecies are. These are the prophecies that are imminent, having minor preconditions. That means they can happen now, at the present moment. So my interest is what can happen to my children and my grandchildren. And so I find out there's probably about 7 or 8 things that I believe people need to be watching for. And they're very significant events that will affect people's lives. So for instance, let me give a few examples in the Old Testament. Noah had a NOW prophecy for his generation. Mm-hmm. It would affect his family, and of course we know that was the flood.
Sure.
Joseph had a NOW prophecy for his generation. He heard there was going to be 7 years of famine. Good news for him is he had 7 years of plenty to prepare for that. Mm-hmm. Jeremiah heard that there was going to be 70 years of captivity. That was his NOW prophecy. We have NOW prophecies right now that we need to make decisions about and to make changes in our lifetime to prepare for. And so that's what I'm trying to alert people to with this book.
Now, this book is different in that it's current, and it speaks about current prophetic events, but it's not complex. It's very, very, I would call it linear. It takes you from one point to the next point to the next point easily, and it's a really good read. But it's all about the things that might happen very, very soon, particularly in the Middle East. And Bill, I have to tell you, and you know this, lots and lots of people have written on this subject, and much of that which is written today is speculative in nature. It is theoretical in nature. You don't know whether to believe it or not. And I think that's where you differ from the rest. This book, I think, is written from the heart. It's written at the spiritual level. I think the Lord led you to do this, and kind of share a little of that with us.
Well, thank you, Gary, for that. That also is very encouraging that you say that, because I do take these things very seriously. I don't want to mislead people. Bible prophecy is information that God wants to impart for us so that we can respect that He's God who loves us and knows the end from the beginning, but also that we can equip our lives for powerful events that are forthcoming. I've tried to format this book and this DVD in a way that it's easily understandable to everybody. Years of research have gone through other books I've written in the past and things like that. So what I've tried to do is take those conclusions that were well researched and put them into a format, a blueprint for people to understand, hey folks, it's time now to prepare for the prophecies. You know, the prophecies were written centuries ago on the parchment, but they were not to remain on that parchment indefinitely. They would someday roll off onto the pavement, and they would affect people, especially in the end times Bible prophecies. You know, it's very interesting how I came up with the name of this book, which I like to share with people because it's kind of a personal touch to the story of this book.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Thanks, Gary. Basically in 2015, I was preparing a series of messages, trying to get people to start to prepare for prophecies that I felt could occur now in their lifetime. And it was around October, the end of October of 2015. I was sleeping, and I had this amazing dream. And in the dream, the Lord was speaking to me. And He said, Bill, I want you to call your next project the NOW Prophecies. Plain as day, one-liner. The NOW Prophecies. And I thought to myself, wow, that's perfect. That's exactly what I've been trying to do this past year. That's what the message that I believe you wanted me to share with people, and I have been sharing with people. I thought this is a godsend. And in my dream, I was in this condition of bliss and peace going, this is perfect. And all of a sudden, my phone rings, which is on the nightstand right next to me. Now, I thought it was my alarm. This is 1:59 in the morning, I find out. I thought it was my alarm. I was going to get up and take my grandkids to school. I set it for 6:30. And I looked, and it's pitch black, and I reach over to turn off what I thought was my alarm, and I'm going, this isn't my alarm. This is a phone call coming in at 1:59 in the morning. It's pitch black. Now, I'm in do not disturb mode. I haven't even had a cup of coffee, and I'm trying to figure out how to turn this thing off. And I'm looking at it, and it's not an American phone number. It's got way too many numbers on it. I'm going, this is some foreign country waking me up. What's going on? So I thought to myself, you know what? God, did you just wake me up on purpose? You know, because I know if I keep sleeping, I might forget in my dream. So I got up and started praying, Gary, and I said, you know what? You want me to write this book and call it the NOW Prophecies? And of course, I took my grandkids to school and came back, and the pen was flowing with ink. Man, I was just writing this book, and I went into seclusion for 4 months just to devote nothing but time to what I thought God wanted me to do on this book. Now, an interesting anecdote to the story is I called that number. I saved it. And I called that number, and they didn't speak English, and it was in, I think, somewhere in Africa. I don't know exactly where. I've tried to trace the call. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. Did man's mistake turn out to be God's providence in this matter? And I tell people in the first chapter, because I write this story, I don't base the content of this book on the dream. It's scripturally researched and lifetime confirmations and answers to prayer, this book. But I thought it was interesting enough just to include it in the book so people know why I came up with the name, the NOW Prophecies. Prophecies that can happen right now. And will these prophecies happen tomorrow? Which they could. Some of them, as we unpack them, they'll say, gee, I'm watching that on the news. I'm very concerned about that, and I'm interesting to know about that. But what the main theme of this book is to let people know that they need to prepare now for what could happen now. The Lord is very long-suffering, and it may take a little time until these things unpack and unfold and all that. It's up to Him. But from our perspective, they could happen tomorrow, so you better be ready for them.
Now, I want to ask you a very specific question, and it's a question that we've all asked a lot lately. Is the American dream dead? And by that, I mean we have a financial collapse, we have political corruption, we have cultural rot at the highest levels. When you watch television anymore, if you're not watching the news, you're watching something that is virtually unwatchable, so morally and ethically corrupt that you can hardly bring yourself to watch it. And you know what I'm talking about. And some people have said we've gone too far. We're over the edge. We'll never get back. Another revival is not possible. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, you make a really important point. There was a survey done not too long ago that came out and said half of the millennials believe the American dream is not available to them. This was a survey done, and this is a concern for people in America. The table talk in the households of America today is, what political superhero is going to be our next president that's going to turn this country around? Yeah. You know, and I want people to start thinking, well, start thinking about what God's wanting for us to understand right now, not what these presidential candidates and what your hopes are for this country. This country is in serious trouble, folks. We've crossed every dangerous biblical boundary that nations and empires, when they've crossed them in the past, neither went back and digressed from them and were ultimately judged and or destroyed because of them. And so we can go through a whole list of those things, but I actually put several chapters in the book. I believe one of the NOW prophecies is watch for the decline of America. When you sit around a table and ask most people about world events and things going on internally in America, and you ask them, do you think things are going to get better? The resounding answer is always no, or I think things are going to get worse before they get better. So people are concerned, Gary. You're touching on the heartbeat of America right now.
So when you write the NOW Prophecies, I think at least part of your motivation has to be to give hope to those who are watching all these things. And I think this book does that. And it deals, and I'm going to go ahead and name the name. It deals with Russia and Ezekiel 38 and all of the Mideast prophecies that we've all read about for the past 20, 30 years, depending on how old we are. Everybody has read and by now just decided, well, you know, that's for another time. They've read Ezekiel 38 and said, yeah, Russia's going to invade Israel, and that's it. You know, why read any more? Mm-hmm. And then the discussion is, well, will I be here when this happens, or will I be gone?
Right. And
so, but you go at this from a much different perspective. And it begins, I think, with a verse, and I'm going to pull my Bible up here. Ezekiel 39:7 says, "So will I make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel, and I will not let them pollute my holy name any more. And the heathen shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel." Wow, what a statement. And it's a statement made by God, and it means a lot to you, I know.
It does. And, this is becoming very real-time application. When Russia put their footprint into Syria in that revolution, the prophecy experts started moving the prophetic calendar up. Oh my goodness, are we getting close to Ezekiel 38? And I think justifiably they should. We're seeing the signs of that Russian invasion. The relationships with Iran are rock solid. Turkey's not friendly with Israel per se. You've got all kinds of reasons why you should start being concerned about Ezekiel 38. I believe the Lord has asked me to trumpet this information to your viewing audience, and that is that verse is what this is about. We've looked at Ezekiel 38. It's the most descriptive biblical prophecy in the Bible, 52 verses in Ezekiel 38 and 39. It tells us everything we need to know about the event. And I believe the Lord did that because it's the event He's chosen out of all the end times events to let the world know He's the one true God of the Bible.
You made me think a lot about something I hadn't considered before. How will the Lord glorify His name? In what way? And why does He even make that statement? When we think of the battle, we always think of Israel being victorious over Russia and over other adversaries. And we think of God favoring Israel. But to glorify one's holy name is something entirely different than just a victory by Israel. It goes a step further. And you point this out, and I think that's maybe one of the best parts of this book.
Well, thank you, Gary. Yeah. Well, that's what caught my attention. Why did you choose Israel and this event versus like the rapture or the church to uphold your holy name? Why did you choose the end times to uphold your holy name? To let the world know who you are. And so there's a series of questions I posit in the book that I want people to look at and think about. Why did this happen, this particular event? Well, first of all, the event, as you know, Gary, it's going to have a captivated audience. The whole world is going to be watching what's going to happen with Ezekiel 38 and 39. So if you're going to trumpet something and announce your holy name, well, that's, of course, the event to do that in. And the timing of that's really important. But why does He choose Israel for that versus the rapture of the church? I'll give you a thought. The rapture, of course, we know is such a big event. I mean, that would certainly be an opportunity to say, look, I'm the one true God of the Bible. I'm the holy God. But He doesn't do that. And I'll give you an example. I write in the book about why it's probably not the rapture. One reason, that's the event where Christ is going to come fetch His bride. And you've talked about it on your program many times. And when you talk about an engagement or a wedding, that's not the time to showcase any other attributes about your business or your life or that sort of thing. I'll give you an example. I was the best man at my son's wedding. And when I gave the best man's toast, I did not talk about, hey, by the way, I own a mortgage company, we're really successful, and we'd love to do your loan. No, this was my son's time. This was all about him and his bride. And Jesus Christ is looking forward. I want to tell your audience right now, Jesus Christ has been waiting 2,000 years to get the command from His Heavenly Father to come and get His bride, and it will happen in the twinkling of an eye, which means there won't be a split second that separates Him and His love for you. And I hope you do believe in Him, and you've got a welcome mat up in heaven through Jesus Christ. So I'm sorry I stepped aside from what we're talking about, but I want them to understand that it's, but that's not what God's upholding His holy name through. Certainly that will catch the world's attention. But why Israel, Gary?
Yeah, why Israel? And when you think of God glorifying Himself, up to now, God has been invisible. There are atheist groups growing today all over the world, and they think they're right. They think that it's a strict discipline, and it's correct and proper to believe that there's no God. And by the way, everything just evolved. It was not created. And our scientists are going to solve all our problems. We don't need God. And all this is going on right now. And there are people who honestly think God is outmoded, gone forever. And certainly it would be great to have God glorify His holy name. But you rightly point out in this book that He picks a particular way to do it, and I think that's unique.
That's not random. I mean,
No.
this is a very strategic choice by the Lord who knows the end from the beginning. You know, you're right. It's like people think the Lord is lurking in the shadows. Of course, we know better.
Yes.
We know better as believers that He's intricated into our lives, integrated into our lives.
Very good.
And and He's about to silence His critics. You know, that they've gotten away with all their ungodliness throughout the centuries.
Yeah.
And in the process of silencing His critics, He's going to settle the dispute about whether Israel's disputed or occupied territory. He's going to shoot replacement theology in the foot and all the erroneous teachings going on in Christianity today. See, this is all what this event is going to lead to. As a church, will we be here? You know, this is a question we don't know. But the bottom line is it does not detract from the fact that the Lord is choosing Israel for various reasons in the end times to let the world know He's God, because the world has forgotten that.
Now, everybody's been waiting. I know you've been waiting for Bill to say when he believes this event is going to happen, a Russian invasion of the Middle East, specifically of Israel, in which the invading force is destroyed. And there has been much speculation about when this is going to happen and how it's going to happen. And I got to tell you that the NOW Prophecies, I think, has the best take on this that I've ever seen. You've brought it up to the next level, and I think everybody's waiting to hear now. When do you think, and how do you think this whole thing's going to unfold?
Okay, well, this whole segment could take the rest of the show because
Well, go
there's so
ahead.
much to talk about
All right.
on this. Before I get into the actual reasons for the timing, you have to think, why would God, at what time on the timeline would God uphold His holy name? Why has He chosen a certain pivotal time on the timeline? And I want to answer that question in a second. But before I do, let's introduce the timeline to your viewers.
Okay.
Because what's always been important to any given generation is the prophetic information they needed to know to equip themselves for the events that would be forthcoming in their generation. When Jeremiah wrote about 70 years of captivity in Jeremiah chapter 25, that was very relevant information for the southern kingdom of Judah, the Jews at that time. But Jeremiah also wrote in chapter 49 about the future of Jordan, the future of Elam, which is Iran today. Damascus he covers in there. But that had nothing to do with what they needed to know in around 586 BC. So this is the question for us. Okay, what's relevant for us? Well, where mankind sits right now is on a timeline between the rebirth of the nation of Israel in 1948. We move the calendar up 68 years to 2016. And the big next monumental bookend, marquee event, is Ezekiel 38, where God's going to let the world know He's the one true God who keeps His covenants and His promises, not only to Israel, but to each individual believer. This is all going to be wrapped up in this event. Now, the question, Gary, is, here's 2016. Where is the Ezekiel event where God's going to uphold His holy name? Is it another 68 years? I think most of us, I think you would agree, we should probably slide this back a little closer here.
Sure.
Okay? But wait a minute. Is Ezekiel 38 and 39 about to happen right now? Are all the preconditions in place? Is it a now prophecy? Is it imminent? And I would contest that no, I don't believe it is. There are certain preconditions that have to happen. I call it a next prophecy. So therefore we find ourselves with this gap. And what now prophecies fill this gap? How powerful are they? How quick do they happen? What are they? That then segues into the way where God says, okay, now I'm going to uphold my holy name before the nations of the world. So I think we're real close, but I want to introduce the prophecies that set the stage for this, that had to be fulfilled before this can happen. And we can talk about those, and then I told you I would conclude with why I think the timing is, why He chose the specific timing of it as a pre-trib timing. I believe this Ezekiel 38 will happen before the tribulation. And here's my reasons for that if you want to know them.
Now, but let's break for just a second and talk about what's going on in the Middle East today.
Okay.
We have the Turks and the Kurds, and we have ISIS fighting in Syria and what used to be Iraq, but is kind of a no-name territory right now. We have Bashar al-Assad in Syria, in league with the Russians. It's a mess over there. How do we unscramble that particular egg right now? I mean, based on what we're seeing in the news today.
Right, and we have to remember to keep our focus on what God's focus is, and that is on what He's going to do through Israel. And Israel is sitting in the middle of this cauldron where you've got everything around Israel is intensifying. Even Saudi Arabia now is talking about entering into the Syrian theater. They're looking for allies. Would Turkey get involved? I mean, this list, this identity of problems you're talking about is getting worse by the minute. And Israel's sitting smack dab in the middle of it, and they're very concerned. And the prophecies that we're starting to talk about are Israel-centered. And I think it's time to start preparing for these prophecies rather than just keep talking about these prophecies. And that's what I'm trying to do with this book.
We have, in a traditional rendering of this prophecy in Ezekiel 38, this legion headed by Gog of the land of Magog, which you and I both believe is Russia,
Yes.
With Iran in tow. And who needs to say anything more about Iran? It's been so much in the news, and it's becoming nuclear. Plus a group of other countries traditionally anti-Israel in their stance. And you have this invasion. You have Israel dwelling safely in the land. And you come down and you find in verse 13 of Ezekiel 38 the statement, Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish, and all the young lions thereof. Sheba, Dedan being the Saudis and others, and the merchants of Tarshish, you say, being the Western Alliance, protesting this invasion. And we can almost see all those things today, through a glass darkly, as Paul would put it.
Right.
But can we really look at this line of events and make it work in terms of the next few years?
Well, there's a few puzzle pieces that we'd have to jam in, because you made a good point. It says this invasion comes against Israel when Israel is dwelling securely. The preconditions are spelled out. The prerequisites before this invasion can occur and before God will uphold his holy name can occur are spelled out in Ezekiel 38 verses 7 through 13. And what they say is that Israel will be brought back to the land that was once waste, gathered out of the nations in the latter days. Some of those will give check marks to, but it says they will be dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, and they will be very prosperous with plunder and booty, because that's what Russia's coming after, and that's what the protesters are protesting against. What are you doing, Russia? You're coming after Israel that's now living in a condition where they at least feel they've accomplished their security and that sort of thing. Now, those are significant preconditions. Yes, Israel's developed natural gas, and they're certainly becoming very prosperous, and that would be a motive, this sort of thing. But the bottom line is they're not dwelling securely, and they've got checkpoints throughout. They've got a big wall, 403-mile wall. They're the most fenced-in and fortified nation in the world. They're building another fence down around the southern Sinai and around Jordan because they're worried about terrorism coming up through the Sinai. So that's where we get into, okay, well, what's going to make Israel dwell securely and take down the walls and not feel concerned about that? And that's where you start getting into, well, there's some prophecies here. There's Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. What about Iran's nuclear program? There's another prophecy in Jeremiah 49 about Elam. Why are the merchants of Tarshish and their young lions, if that's America, simply protesting, not fighting for their interests with Israel? The decline of America then is another NOW prophecy. So we get in, there's, like I said, there's a menu of about 6 or 7 of these that I think your viewers need to be watching for.
Now, what you're doing, and we're not going to have time to finish this today, but we are going to have another program with Bill in which we're going to get deeply into the details of what he thinks has to happen before the Russian invasion. And he's given some great thought to the fact that a number of events in, I would say, the very near future have to take place which will bring Israel into the status described by Ezekiel. In other words, dwelling safely in the land, securely in the land, which you say they really are not right now. So something has to happen to bring them to that point. Then comes the major invasion. Is that?
Well, absolutely. And the thing is, Israel's not building the walls and fences because they're worried about the invaders in Ezekiel 38. Yes, a little bit with Iran. They're very concerned about Iran. But those invaders in Ezekiel 38 are not the invaders that are Israel's ancient nemesis that voted against Israel and this sort of thing, came to war against Israel. No, it's those people that inner circle that share common borders with terrorist populations in them of Psalm 83.
Well, let's talk about some now type things. And I'm going to kind of go through your little micro notes here. Disaster in Iran, as described by Jeremiah. Destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17. The toppling of Jordan, Jeremiah 49, terrorization of Egypt, Isaiah 19, the final Arab-Israeli war, Psalm 83, and of course you've written extensively about Psalm 83, decline of America, Ezekiel 38:13. Now, you've listed a number of events that interlock, and I think you're the first to come along and do that in the way that you've done it, to point out that certain things like little dominoes have to fall before you get to the big one. And so let's go there and make that clear to our viewers.
Right, and I'd like to also encourage your viewers to think about this. When Ezekiel 38 happens, a lot of people, when they look at the potential for Ezekiel 38 happening now, they're looking at Israel in its present geopolitical condition, thinking that we're real close to that fulfillment of that prophecy. What I want them to look at is, well, what is the Israel really going to look like, considering that these potential now prophecies will happen in advance and set the stage for Ezekiel 38 and 39. And that will give you a different perspective of how I think we should be treating the Ezekiel event. It will be an unbelievable time in the world's future when the Lord will have a captivated world audience, and he will stop the invasion of Ezekiel 38, we're told. It won't be the Israeli Defense Forces, it won't be America. And he will be able to say, look, I did it. I am the one, the Holy One of Israel. My name is holy. So, but these now prophecies, Gary, they are no small potatoes events.
Okay, let's talk about that disaster in Iran. Iran is a powder keg. What can I say? And you've lectured on this before, and I'm just going to turn it over to you. Tell us about Iran and how Iran is going to play into the near future.
In a nutshell, Iran has double jeopardy in the end times. You know, most of your viewers are familiar with Ezekiel 38, verse 5 says that Persia is involved in that Ezekiel invasion, and Persia was once called Iran was once called Persia until 1935. Powerful prophecy, but we're not going there. We're going into the other prophecy, been vastly overlooked. We've talked about it on your show before with my book called Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing the ancient prophecy of Elam, E-L-A-M. There's another prophecy dealing with Iran that talks about a disaster. I think it could be nuclear, Gary, in Iran. And what it says in this prophecy, it's only 6 verses in Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39, that a time would come when the Lord would be fiercely angry with the leadership of Iran. It says he will destroy from there the kings and the princes. You do not destroy good leadership. I think he's very upset with the Iranian leadership today that is trying to put together a nuclear weapon that wants to destroy Israel, the very Israel that the Lord will uphold his holy name through in Ezekiel 39:7. Iran will not destroy them, or the Lord would be have a lot of egg on his face, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So it says that the reason he's angry with them is they want to launch something lethal somewhere, because he says he will break their bow at the foremost of their might. The problem we have there is that all of a sudden this becomes a disaster, because it says that the indigenous population will be affected by something and have to flee immediately out into the nations of the world. I think we're dealing with a nuclear scenario, because that is where the Bushehr nuclear reactor is. It's a nuclear disaster waiting to happen. On a map, you'll see that Elam hugs the Persian Gulf, and that Bushehr province is in there. Russia's contracted to build more nuclear sites in there since this nuclear deal's
Right
come out.
on the water's edge, by the way. What a terrible place to build a nuclear reactor, on the shore of the Persian Gulf.
Exactly, and I'm actually looking at the Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39 as possibly, I sequence it as possibly the next event. And I do want to say to your viewers, listen, putting these things in their chronological order is a bit speculative. I'm doing the best I can to tell you how I think they will lay out. I think that's important. You know, how do we prepare for these as they will probably unfold? But when they unfold, they'll be like birth pangs. You know, they'll be coming. That one event will lead to a more intense event, and they'll start happening with more frequency, and they will be unpreventable and unstoppable.
Now, we've talked about Iran. Everybody knows about the Ayatollah Khamenei. He stands up in his wonderfully tailored outfit, and he shakes his fist and cries out, "Death to America," all the time. I mean, it's something, it just gives him a thrill. America being a Christian nation. We may be the last outpost of something called a Christian nation. We're failing, I believe, fast, but we're still a Christian nation. Satan knows that. And when the Ayatollah stands up and says death to America, he's not kidding, right?
Oh, no, and you'll never see the Ayatollah Khamenei shake President Barack Obama's hand, because it would literally be like shaking Satan's hand. You'll never see that happen. Now, there's a couple things to talk about here. Basically, there's another reason I believe the Lord is angry with Iran, is Iran is the fastest growing evangelical population in the world right now. They are having dreams. The Iranians are having dreams, visions, miracles, and healings. They are disenchanted with Islam. It has let them down since the 1979 revolution. And this is actually some good news in the Jeremiah prophecies.
It's not too late to pray for revival. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and in Iran right now, we need to understand that the Lord is doing miraculous work there, and they're trying to repress that, the Ayatollah. Ayatollah wants to wipe Israel off the map, probably try to get a nuclear weapon to do that. These are things that I believe contribute to the anger the Lord has with Israel. Now, there's a nuclear deal on the table since July of 2015. Benjamin Netanyahu is severely opposed to it. President Barack Obama stands up and applauds it. And let me ask your viewers, what do you think God stands on this right now? And I'm telling you, I believe the Lord is with Benjamin Netanyahu on this. And our president has led us into a real fine mess here. And that's what I'm trying to warn you guys about.
Now, let's talk about the next item on the list, the destruction of Damascus. Where would that fit?
Well, I think if Iran gets hit, they're not going to take one for the team, especially if it's a major hit with Israel. And by the way, we do want to remind your viewers that Iran is becoming more prepared for an invasion. They're getting the S-300 missile defense system from Russia, which will make it very difficult for anybody to invade, especially Israel. This is all in play right now. We talk about a whole mess in the Middle East. This is another thing to keep an eye on. Iran is becoming very fortified now and able to defend themselves much better. Now, if Iran gets hit and a major biblical prophecy happens, Iran will not just play possum on this. They will contact Hezbollah, who's got 150,000 missiles, one of their proxies. They will get involved with Bashar al-Assad's regime, which, by the way, they're starting to win that war in Syria because Russia's gotten involved. So we're seeing them getting a little more cocky, if you will, like, hey, listen, Bashar al-Assad may be able to remain in power. Hamas will side with them also. And all of a sudden now you're going to have a war coming into Israel. And Israel will not be able to withstand that punch. They will act out, and they will act out rapidly. And we already see, here's the reason why Damascus becomes, matter of fact, let's take a moment to talk about the Damascus prophecy, and then I want to tell them why they should be watching that for right now.
Okay. Damascus prophecy, of course, the destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17. This city, 4,000 years old, has never been destroyed in the 4,000 years. There's a street called Straight that runs right through it. It's still there. It's been there for 4,000 years, probably one of the original streets, and it's going to be smashed.
It says that the city will be a ruinous heap. It says, Damascus shall cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap reduced to rubble. And it goes on to say in verse 9 that there is desolation because of the children of Israel. Okay, so it's not the Syrian revolution that is knocking Damascus down, although that's been a real big deal, of course. But then it goes on and say, verse 14, as the prophecy concludes, that one night you see Damascus, but in the morning it's gone. So it's a technology that Israel possesses. It could be a nuclear destruction of Damascus.
So you think that it's probable that that destruction would come from Israel?
I think that's what the prophecy specifically states.
Okay.
It says there will be desolation because of the children of Israel. And verse 14 says that one night you see Damascus, in the morning it's gone. This is the portion of those who rob us and plunder us. So we find out that it's not Israel being an aggressor. It's Israel responding out of self-defense, which is important for people to know. Now, with respects to why this is something I'm watching for now, because Syria has said that if Israel attacks Syria, they will attack Tel Aviv. Okay? Israel's response was, if you attack Tel Aviv, we will take out Damascus. This is all, you can Google all this information.
Sure.
I'm not making this up, and this has been the rhetoric going back several years.
Well, let's put another aspect in here. Next item on Bill's sort of list of soon coming things would be the toppling of Jordan. Now, Jordan is a country to the east of Israel, right across the Jordan River, and King Abdullah II is the ruling monarch there. But Abdullah is frightened right now. Tell us about that.
Oh, he's at his wit's end, Gary. He is concerned about everything going around his borders. He's having to take in way too many Syrian refugees, which are many of them being recruited for ISIS, both men and women. He's got thousands of them still on his border. They're only able to allow in about 100 or 150 a day, and literally he's got 16 to 20,000 sitting out there as we speak. And he's come to visit President Barack Obama 3 times in the last 2 years because he needs help. He's looking at himself probably being the next Arab leader to be deposed or assassinated, whatever the case may be. He's very freaked out. And in Jeremiah 49 verse 5, it says that there's a time when fear would come around everybody around Jordan that would actually really be troubling to Jordan, and ultimately leads to a war in Jordan and things like that. I put that with Psalm 83. That fear, I invite your readers to read Jeremiah 49:5, is alive and well right now. It has never been at the level it is right now as it is. So there's another prophecy in Jeremiah 49 verse 5.
And I wanted to get in one little wrinkle about Jordan. Jordan essentially holds control and sway over the Temple Mount right now, the Arab Waqf, or the Arab administration of the Temple Mount.
Yes, after Israel won that war in 1940, I think it was in 67 when they gave it back to Jordan, the Waqf. Remember that they also have a peace treaty in 1994 with Jordan,
right,
when Bill Clinton got involved. And that was a politically expedient treaty for Jordan to have with Israel. They got tired of losing wars, plus they got some aid and things like that. But remember that every time Israel talks about taking control over the Temple Mount, Jordan starts waving that peace treaty in the air saying, get ready, we're going to rip this up. So Jordan, supposedly the last moderate Arab state, is really still no friend of Israel's, and they don't recognize Israel's right to exist. And ISIS wants to take over Jordan, and very possibly will, because there's Sunni sympathizers in Jordan that were also Sunni sympathizers in Syria and Iraq, and they folded like a cheap suit when ISIS came in, and that's the same thing that could happen to Jordan.
Okay, let's go to Israel's south now. What about Egypt? Egypt is down there sort of playing quiet right now after the terrible uprisings they had last year and the year before. What's going on with Egypt in the Bible?
Yeah, Egypt is the #1 Arab country. I think there's 80-some million Arabs over there, and they're spoken about in Ezekiel 29 and Isaiah 19. I think we need to be looking at those as potential prophecies for our time. Isaiah verses 1 through 18, 19 verses 1 through 18 talk about Egypt collapsing. It says, oh, brother will come against brother, neighbor against neighbor, kingdom against kingdom, city against city, etc. And a cruel master comes into their economy just falls, collapses, everything goes wrong. It says everyone who seeks wages will be troubled with soul. And then it gets on, and we find out in verses 16, 17, and 18 why. It's because they're terrorized by something going on in Judah, something with Israel. Sounds like, to me, I put them in Psalm 83. It sounds to me like they get involved in the war that makes things real problematic for them, and they get cursed. It says it happens as a swift judgment. The Lord flies in as like a swift cloud. And then ultimately it says in verse 18, 5 cities in the land of Egypt will speak the language of Canaan, which is Hebrew. So it looks like Israel actually expands territorially, which is another now prophecy, the expansion of Israel into some of the Arab countries that are all within the parameters of the Promised Land. The world wants to shrink Israel up right now and have Israel give a plan for peace. I'm going to tell your viewers that's not likely to happen. Look for the opposite to happen.
Now, I've said for a long time that Egypt seems to be destroyed early on because they are not in that table of nations, that alliance that comes down with Gog. Their name is missing, so something must have happened to them.
Nor is Jordan, nor is any of the other countries in Psalm 83, which would be Lebanon, where you have Hezbollah. You've got Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, I believe Egypt in there. You got the Palestinians. Of course, you got the Hamas over in Philistia, ancient Philistia, the Gaza. None of those are in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and those are the ones that make Israel dwell in securely. Israel must someday dwell securely. That's a prerequisite before Ezekiel 38 can happen. So these are now prophecies to me. These things have to happen, and they could happen at any given time. And that's my concern.
The book is the NOW Prophecies by author Bill Salus, and we'll tell you in a minute how you can get it. What we're doing is what Bill does in this book, taking a very logical flow of the events that would seem necessary prior to this major invasion of Israel, described in Ezekiel 38. And I think he's done a marvelous job of, if you will, unscrambling an egg, because it's really not easy to put these things in chronological order. But I think you've done a marvelous job of it, and thereby rendered the prophecy readable, because a lot of people have read it assuming they understand what's going to happen. And then the next thing they do is say, well, it's going to happen like day after tomorrow, so get ready. And that's been going on for the last 30 years, and it's never happened. And then you come along and you say, well, wait a minute, there are certain precursor events. And that, to me, is very interesting. If you are a student of Bible prophecy, you've got to follow through this with Bill, because He will show you logically at this progression of events. Let's talk about America now. What's got to happen to America before the big invasion of the Middle East?
We in our prior program we talked about how we've crossed every dangerous biblical boundary.
Yeah.
Let me share a story with you, which I think we can do in just a couple of minutes. Will sort of encapsulate my concerns for America. Chuck Missler is someone we both respect, a Bible prophecy teacher. He and I had a conversation. Now, Chuck Missler for quite a while was talking about 2 Chronicles 7:14, for several decades. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I would hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. The thought was perhaps that would apply for America, which was going south, kicking God out of our culture since the 1960s. And that was sort of the mantra for many pulpits and things like that. And I said to Chuck, I believe you're no longer teaching that you're concerned we won't necessarily have a Nineveh moment where Nineveh repented and the Lord relented from judging them during Jonah's time. He said, I'm concerned, Bill, we may be gone too far from that. And so I said to Chuck, well, that means we're at Jeremiah 7:16. And what that basically says there is that the Lord told Jeremiah, listen, I don't even make intercession for the southern kingdom of Judah anymore. Your prayers I will not hear, because look what they're doing in the streets of Jerusalem. In other words, the Lord, who knows the beginning from the end, knew at that time that there would be no 2 Chronicles 7:14 going on, no Nineveh moment in the southern kingdom of Judah. So he said to Jeremiah, prepare them for captivity. Your prayers are going on deaf ears at this point. They're not going to change, right? So then I said to Chuck, that means if that's the case, that we have a Hosea 4:6 to be concerned about, which is one of the chapters in the book. Will Americans perish for lack of knowledge? Hosea warned to the northern kingdom, which was destroyed by Syria in 722 BC. He said, look, the judgment is coming. He's speaking to all the inhabitants of the land, whether they had faith or not faith. And the religious leadership at the time was not teaching the message. The people weren't getting the memo the way they were supposed to, and they weren't listening to the prophets like they should have been. And he said, everyone who lacks understanding will be trampled. And then he says in verse 6 of Hosea 4, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And Gary, that's my concern right now. The pulpits across America right now are not laying out the prophecies the way they should and preparing people for them. It would be like Noah was saying, there's a flood coming, you need to get ready, and the people were laughing and scoffing. And that's what we got going on right now.
Indeed. But God is there. God speaks. He is not silent. To those who will hear, he's speaking loudly and clearly in our day. And I know that this is what drives Bill to the study of Bible prophecy, because people like you out there are not without some sense of destiny. God is working in a way that is very clear through Bible prophecy. You know it, I know it. Bill Salus is led to clarify these things, to give us hope. And most of all, Bill, and I know you feel this way, I think of the correct study of Bible prophecy is the best evangelical tool that we have in our arsenal. If you can convince people of the reality of Bible prophecy and then lead them to Christ, that's a solid conversion.
Absolutely. The Lord devoted about a third of the Bible to give us prophetic information. And he didn't have these prophets write these notes down centuries ago because God's got a bad memory and he needed to be reminded of what's going to happen. He gave us the information because he knew we would need it to get through the times which we're going through. It was relevant for Jeremiah to know what he needed to know about the Babylonian captivity, for Joseph to know what he needed to know about the famine, and there are things we need to know about what's coming into this country and in this world.
Now, something we ought to discuss here a little bit more is Ezekiel 38:13. Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? In other words, have you come to loot us and to take all of our goods and all of our money? Now, we've got this protest to the invasion. Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish. And this is another little NOW prophecy that you've got in your book.
Yeah, we have to find out who are those four people. The prophecy has 9 members of Russia's coalition, has Israel's involved, The Lord's certainly involved because he stops the invasion, but that's not the end of the story. There's these 4 other population groups, Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, and the young lions. And they're not fighting with Russia, but they also don't seem to be defending Israel nor protecting their commercial interests. They're standing on the sidelines echoing the motive of Russia's invasion. Are you coming for plunder and booty? So I try to, in the book, identify who those people are, and I put forward very strong arguments, biblically, archaeologically, prophetically, geopolitically, as to why Americans need to be paying attention to Ezekiel 38:13 as us being the young lions of the merchants of Tarshish, the UK being the merchants of Tarshish. So the reason I think it's important for them to get into that and do their own homework on that is because that America is less than a superpower from what it appears there. Why would we not be stopping Russia? Why would we not be fighting along our friend Israel?
It's a weak
at that
protest
point?
rather than a counterattack. So that this picture is a picture of a weak and dying America.
And I believe that's a now prophecy. I believe the decline of America is starting right now from this point forward. You know, we said goodbye to God, and we sort of signed our own tombstone on June 26th of 2015 when we approved same-sex marriages. And I know that Americans are looking for some political superhero to turn things around. But is that individual going to come into the office and reverse some of these Supreme Court decisions that are poking God in the eye? Abortions, can't approve same-sex marriage, approving same-sex marriages, can't approve the definition of a biblical marriage, one man to one woman? I don't think so, folks. And I would say put your focus on Jesus Christ, not on some political superhero in these days.
And the abortion question. It's now okay, it's just perfectly permissible to take a newborn baby and rip it to pieces and sell the parts. I know that sounds ghastly. I almost choke when I say it, but we're there, Bill.
Well, we are, and we have to ask ourselves, how does God feel about what's going on in these various places? You know, God has allowed mankind to set himself apart from God's will. He's allowed mankind to forget God's foreign policy in Genesis 12, verse 3, that he'll bless those that bless his plan of redemption through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob on through the Jewish people. But, you know, God is about to silence his critics. He's about to let people know that Israel has a right to that land. He's about to get real serious in the world scene, and that's in Ezekiel 38.
Now, the next item on your list of things is the expansion of Israel. Now, we're down to a very few minutes, and that's followed by the vanishing of the Christians. I love that one.
Yeah, well, that's the blessed hope, right?
It is.
You and I, you know, one of the things that compels, I know both you and I, because we believe the Lord could come at any moment.
Amen.
There's no preconditions for that. It's
Yes.
a signless event. It's imminent. Is it drives us to holiness and evangelism. I know that your ministry and my ministry is based upon taking the prophetic word of God and using it to witness to people to lead
Right.
them to Jesus Christ. And Revelation 19:10 says that the testimony of the spirit of prophecy is the actual testimony of Jesus Christ. So I think people need to understand what the rapture is. I give 6 to 10 reasons in that book as to why it's a pre-trib event, and I just try to encourage people with that message.
The book is the NOW Prophecies. Bill explained to me off camera that his real motivation in writing this book was not to write a heavy tome with every last detail in it, but to write a book that is easy to read, that will lead you along, that will take you through a, if you will, a logical track that will bring you to a conclusion about a certain aspect of Bible prophecy. And I think he's done it. The NOW Prophecies, by the way, $14.95 in our online bookstore. That is prophecywatchers.com. Just click the online bookstore. You can get that book. And with it is a DVD. By the way, I have viewed this DVD. My wife and I sat and watched it. We were never bored. That's all I'm going to tell you. It'll lead you along to some amazing prophetic conclusions. Also $14.95 in our online bookstore. The two together, $27.95, and with that you get a free DVD. It's the Prophecy Watchers trip to Israel. It's called Join Us in Jerusalem, and with every order we include a copy of our magazine, The Prophecy Watcher. Bill has an article in the March edition, which you'll get when you order the book or DVD. We also have the Bill Salus collection in our online bookstore. That would include Psalm 83, the book and the DVD. And Nuclear Showdown, the book and the DVD. We've got all Bill's works right there. All you have to do is go to prophecywatchers.com, click the online bookstore, go down to the Bill Salus collection, and you can pick and choose. Hey, order it all. Bill's a good writer. And by the way, he's got a lot to say. Bill, it's a pleasure. We've got a little over a minute. How would you draw this to a conclusion? What would you urge people to study?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that the ancient prophecies are gifts to us of information. It's a plethora of information. They were not intended to stay on the parchment indefinitely. These prophecies are going to roll off the parchment and they're going to hit the pavement, and they're going to affect people, and they're not going to just affect Damascus or Iran. They're going to affect you and America as well, because the end times Bible prophecies were the significant events that the Lord knew would be globally impacting. So we can't sit here in America and think, well, that's over in Damascus. You know, this stuff is hitting our backyard now with 911 and the terrorism in San Bernardino, and I guarantee you that the Lord knows that these prophecies will affect you, and you need to know about them, and He wants you to know about them because He loves you.
Indeed, and that's the bottom line. He loves you, and He wants to reach out to you and give you the opportunity to ask to become, if you will, a member of His family, which you can do through the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ and His saving blood. All you have to do is ask. Salvation will be yours. Get the book. It's called The NOW Prophecies, and it's an easy read. Bill Salus, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Gary.
And to the rest of you, keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, and we'll see you soon.